day. Was that initial excitement all just a fictitious, if thrilling, children's story? Or is the next chapter for Steve Jobs likely to be his gaudiest? What should we expect next from Pixar?
Well, you know, Toy Story has really exceeded our expectations. It's about 180 million right now, I think, at domestic box office. It's being released internationally as we speak. And we're coming out with some CD-ROMs based on Toy Story starting in April. And they're dynamite. I think they're going to pretty much set a new benchmark for what can be done with CD-ROMs. Home video was expected later on this year, and we're well at work on our second film. We're about a year into development on it. So I think we have a business model which is that we make feature films and surround them with a suite of related products. In addition to merchandise and home video, there's CD-ROMs and potentially, you know, sequels at some point in time.
You first came to public attention with Apple. In recent weeks, it's been one of the failure stories of Wall Street and indeed of the American economy. What went wrong at Apple?
Oh, gosh. You know, Apple, I haven't been there in a long time, but my perception is...
We won't blame you for what's happened in the last 10 years.
Yeah, no, I mean, my perception may not be complete, but from the way I see it, I mean, Apple was a company that was based on innovation. When I left Apple 10 years ago, we were 10 years ahead of anybody else. It took Microsoft 10 years to copy Windows. The problem was that Apple stood still. Even though it invested cumulatively billions in R&D, the output has not been there, and people have caught up with it, and its differentiation has eroded, in particular with respect to Microsoft. And so the way out for Apple, and I still think Apple has a future, there's some awfully good people there, and there's a tremendous brand loyalty to that company. I think the way out is not to slash and burn, it's to innovate. That's how Apple got to its glory, and I think that's how Apple could return to it.
Next, which is your private venture, specializes in what's called object-based software. Could you explain that to someone who's not a computer nerd?
Sure. The way that most people still build software today, they build, everything's custom, really. Everything's built by hand and everything's custom. And there's no ability to reuse software that you had written prior or that somebody else had written. And objects are a way to basically allow people to reuse software an order of magnitude or two more efficiently than they can today. It's sort of the industrial revolution of software.
Is this on a grander scale the equivalent of calling up a macro on the computer?
It's even much beyond that. It's sort of interchangeable parts, much like the Industrial Revolution brought to the manufacturing of hard goods.
You have talked about Apple somewhat gently. You've also mentioned Microsoft. Much of your current efforts seem directed at constraining Microsoft. Is that accurate?
Me?
No. I've read some of these computer nerd publications lately, and it seems to me that the fight for the internet you envision as anybody but Bill Gates.
Well, I think there's a lot of people working on stuff for the internet, and Next is one of those companies as well. And for me, the most exciting thing, you know, in the software area is the internet, and part of the reason for that is no one owns it. It's a free-for-all. It's much like the early days of the personal computer, and the rate of innovation is very high. And we know from experience now that if any one company gets a dominant position in it, no matter who that is, the rate of innovation is going to drop precipitously. And we'd like to not see that happen forever, or at least for quite some time.
I assume as a good entrepreneur you want the market to limit him, not the government. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't get into that so much. I think I admire Microsoft for their achievements, and I think, though, that the net may be something that is, you know, we're going to see innovation contain them, and I'm hoping that's the case.
I wonder if Steve Jobs is relaxing on this holiday weekend, or figuring out how to make his next trillion. I guess it's tough at the top, but it can be beautiful, too. Last Christmas, we gave our viewers a sneak advance peek at some items from the most publicized auction in history, Sotheby's sale of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis's property. The CEO of Sotheby's, D.D. Brooks, brought down some special treasures for your eyes only. Now, before we meet tonight's special guest, the woman who runs the world's largest auction house, let's look at some of the best goodies in the house to see once and for all whether you agree with the very rich of this world when they smile at this time of year and say, it's nice to be able to afford this stuff. Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis was one who could, and just last week, Sotheby's created a sensation by announcing the sale next April of property from her estate. Ask not whether you can afford these sketches of the late President and First Lady, or this Victorian needlepoint rug used in the Oval Office. Do you think Oliver Stone is interested? When Paul Mellon was asked about spending a king's ransom to buy a painting by Cézanne, he reportedly shrugged his shoulders and said, "You look at that, and what is money?" My sentiments exactly, if you happen to have it, that is. For somewhere north of, say, $140,000, mere chump change to the affluent, you might pick up this 16th century Salviati portrait of a man wearing a black hat. It'll look great in the powder room. Or if you're a little strapped after finishing your Christmas shopping, you might prefer another item from next month's Old Masters sale. Say this Il Guercino red chalk drawing done about a century later and likely to fetch about 100 grand less. Give it to the kids if they promise to stop playing hooky. It's from the Baroque period, which is what you may be if you go for Baroque. Or you might want to go really far out. 20 years ago, American astronauts and Russian cosmonauts made history on the first joint international spaceflight. In March, Sotheby's will auction this Soviet cosmonaut's logbook for an estimated $8,000 to $12,000. A few months after Korean artist Park Soo-keen did this oil painting in 1961, a San Francisco woman bought it for $200. Next March, it's expected to fetch $300,000. Check your attic for any odd thing you might have picked up in the 60s. The British are coming, but don't worry. They'll presumably just be bidding on this classic of American silver, a porringer crafted by Paul Revere, Jr. in 1790. About 10 grand should take it away, by land or by sea. And speaking of American history, if that is the word, don't forget Pocahontas. Sotheby's will be selling animation art from the Disney feature in February, hoping to repeat its 1995 success with The Lion King, whose sales roared for a record $2 million. A variety of other trinkets will be auctioned off in early 1996 for those with less animated bank accounts. What hard-working businesswoman wouldn't want to surprise her weekend date with this 70-year-old Cartier platinum and diamond open-faced dress watch for a trifling $5 or $6 grand? Or if he already picks you up on time, perhaps this Cartier diamond, platinum, and gold dress set with cufflinks and studs. Or if he likes to putter in the garage, you might prefer this extremely rare set of tools for a flintlock firearm made for King Louis XIV. It's worth around $5 grand and would certainly make the perfect stocking stuffer for Tim Allen. And what guy wouldn't want to reciprocate? If the lady likes horses, she might be diverted by this Nuremberg bronze table fountain in the form of Neptune riding hippocampi. It's about 4 centuries old, and you can make her young eyes light up for something in the low 6 figures. It's better than flowers. Moving away from Sotheby's to a couple of items we collected for this show on our own, this 1953 model Chevrolet Corvette was part of the very first production of that car. It's been driven only 9,100 miles and is valued by some at a mint-cool $250,000. But if you really listen to our advice this past 25 years, you might be ready to splurge on this 1934 Duesenberg Model J Murphy convertible sedan. It was never cheap, and today this doozy of a car would fetch close to $1 million. You folks talk among yourselves. I'll be back right after Scott Fitzgerald's cocktail party. But no, duty calls, not to mention the sight of all those baubles. So let's go over now and meet tonight's special guest, Diana D. Brooks. Diana, welcome. Thanks so much for coming down this holiday weekend.
Thank you for having me.
When Diana Brooks, known to the world as Dee Dee, was asked if she wakes up in the morning thinking about how to keep close rival Christie's from catching up to Sotheby's, she replied that she actually wakes up thinking about how she is going to get her 12-year-old son out of bed. Dee Dee seemingly has done it all: wife, mother, lending officer at Citibank, and a variety of posts in her 16 years at Sotheby's, culminating in her appointment last year as president and chief executive officer of Sotheby's Holdings Incorporated. Dee Dee, how healthy is this high-priced art market?
I think at this point that the market is the strongest that it's been since 1990, and I think that the market, as we've seen it this fall, has shown strength across a lot of different markets.
Does the art market follow the stock market?
Certain parts of the art market do, and it certainly is affected by the stock market, particularly from a psychological standpoint.
First time we ever did a program about investing in art, I got a wonderful letter from the great writer John MacDonald, who said that the guest had not approached the subject correctly, because it wasn't like machine tool stocks. There had to be something inside you that responded to the art. What's your advice to people who think about investing in art?
I think that investing in art does require a passion for art, and I think that the first step in thinking about buying art is, do you really love it? Do you want to live with it? Because at the end of the day, it takes a lot of care and protection. So my advice always is, if you're able to afford it, the first thing to do is to love it, and then hopefully it will appreciate in value over a period of time if you've bought the right thing.
What's the least amount of money in which one could really get into art collecting?
I think it depends on what you're buying. There are some categories that you could, with $50,000, form a wonderful collection. It might be only toy soldiers, but it would be a wonderful collection. But obviously, if you want to participate in an area such as American paintings or Impressionist and modern paintings, you'd have to be looking at several $1 million even to start, and an Impressionist probably $25 million.
$50,000 still sounds like a lot of money. What's the cheapest item you're likely to auction off next year?
Well, we have some things in the Onassis sale that are actually estimated at about $100.
Now you're talking.
Now we're talking.
And as it turns out, we were pretty much just talking, because enthusiasm at the Onassis sale went so far over the top that, for example, the sketch of President Kennedy, which was estimated to fetch $3,000 to $4,000, sold for more than $101,000. I knew the market was doing well, but this was ridiculous. Well, my friend, I hope you'll be with us again next week, when we'll get back to what passes for normal around here and talk with top airline analyst Sam Buttrick. Fasten your seatbelts. Meanwhile, this has been Wall Street Week. I'm Louis Rukeyser. Good night and keep rocking.
Wall Street Week with Louis Rukeyser is a production of Maryland Public Television, made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the annual financial support from viewers like you. By Prudential Securities, with more than 5,600 financial advisors nationwide, Prudential Securities can help you invest your money wisely. By A.G. Edwards, going beyond stocks and bonds to help you create the right plan for a more secure retirement. A.G. Edwards, serving investors for more than 100 years. And by Oppenheimer Funds, because solid investment performance and sound financial planning go hand in hand. Wall Street Week with Louis Rukeyser is produced by Maryland Public Television, which is solely responsible for its content. For a printed transcript of this program, send $5 to Transcripts, Wall Street Week with Louis Rukeyser, Owings Mills, Maryland, 21117. Transcripts are also available to subscribers of the Dow Jones News Retrieval Service.
This is PBS.
Major support for Wall Street Week on Maine Public Television is made possible by the Trust Department of Bangor Savings Bank, providing trust and investment services to Maine people and their families. Additional support is provided by Nelson Rarities, worldwide buyers, sellers, and appraisers of antique and estate jewelry with headquarters in Portland, Maine.
June 1940, the Third Reich and the Western Allies prepare to fight the longest battle of World War II.
For both sides, control of the Atlantic Ocean was the key to final victory or defeat.
The German U-boats go head-to-head with the Royal Navy to sever Britain's trading links with the world. Next time on Battlefield 2.
Monday night at 9.